I told my husband I was pregnant and he panicked. I wasn't even trying to get pregnant. That's the crazy part. It started like any other Monday morning. I had woken up feeling unusually tired and slightly nauseous. I blamed it on the leftover shawarma from the night before. But 3 days passed, and the nausea didn't go away. Then I realized I'd missed my period. That's when my heart began to race with a strange mixture of fear and hope. I bought a test, more out of curiosity than real suspicion. I waited until my husband left for work, then locked myself in the bathroom. I didn't expect those 2 bold pink lines. I just stared at them, my heart pounding like a drum. I pressed a hand to my belly, my lips parting in disbelief. I was pregnant. Me. After months of thinking we might need help conceiving, after countless months of hearing, "Let's wait a bit longer," from my husband, it finally happened. I wanted to scream. To dance. To cry. And when I called him that afternoon, I was glowing. I couldn't keep it in. "Babe," I said, nearly shaking with excitement, "you won't believe this, I'm pregnant." There was a pause. A long, heavy pause. "Wait." "What?" he said, his voice strange. "Off." "You're pregnant?" I laughed nervously. "Yes." "Isn't that amazing?" He didn't answer. I heard his breath, quick and uneven. "I need to call you back," he mumbled, and the line went dead. I sat on the edge of the bed, confused, my phone still pressed to my ear. What just happened? I waited. Minutes passed. Then hours. No call back. No text. Nothing. When he finally walked in the door later that night, his face looked pale, like he'd seen a ghost. He didn't even kiss me. He just walked past me like I wasn't even there, went straight into the kitchen and poured himself a drink. "Talk to me," I said gently, walking over. I wasn't expecting this," he said, eyes fixed on the wall. "You sure?" I nodded slowly. "I took 2 tests. Both were positive." He rubbed his face. "This is a lot." I frowned. "You're scaring me." He looked at me, his eyes hollow. "You don't understand." "Then help me understand." But he didn't. Not that night. Or the next. Instead, he grew distant. Restless. Like something was eating him from the inside out. And I had no idea that my happy little announcement had just cracked open a door I didn't even know existed, one that led to a part of his life I never imagined. To a secret he never intended for me to find. But I was about to. The next few days felt like I was living with a stranger. He stopped touching me. Stopped talking to me unless it was absolutely necessary. He started sleeping later than usual, going to bed after me and waking up before me. Sometimes I'd catch him staring blankly at the wall, lost in a world I wasn't part of. I tried everything, cooking his favorite meals, sending him sweet texts, asking him out on walks, but he just kept pulling further away. I didn't want to nag, but the silence was suffocating. Finally, one evening as we sat in the living room, I couldn't take it anymore. "Daniel," I said, my voice shaking slightly, "I need to know what's going on." He didn't answer right away. He was scrolling through his phone, but I could tell he wasn't really seeing anything on the screen. "I told you I'm just overwhelmed," he said flatly. "This isn't just overwhelmed," I snapped, my voice rising. "You've been treating me like a stranger since I told you I'm pregnant. What are you not saying?" He sighed, dropped his phone on the couch, and stood up. "You wouldn't understand." "Try me," I said, standing too. Then he really looked at me, and for a second, I saw something in his eyes. Guilt. Regret. Fear. "I made mistakes before we got married," he finally said, his voice low. My stomach dropped. "What kind of mistakes?" He hesitated. Then shook his head. "I can't talk about this right now." "Why not?" "Because if I tell you, everything will change." I stepped closer. Daniel, everything has already changed. I'm carrying your child. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, but then closed it again. His jaw tightened, and he turned away. I need air. And just like that, he grabbed his keys and walked out of the house. I stood there trembling, wondering what mistake could be so deep, so devastating, that it made a man walk out on the best news of his life. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation, every word, every look. And for the first time, I allowed a dark thought to creep in. What if there's someone else? I shook it off, telling myself I was just being paranoid. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. And then, the next morning, I got the message that changed everything. An unknown number. A single line. Ask your husband about Anita and his son. My heart froze. Son? I stared at the message for what felt like an hour. Ask your husband about Anita and his son. Every instinct in me wanted to scream. Who was Anita? Whose son? Was this a prank? Or worse, was this the truth behind his panic? My fingers trembled as I tried calling the number. It rang once, then went dead. I tried again. Blocked. I sat there, staring at my phone like it had betrayed me. My chest felt tight. I wanted to believe it was a sick joke. But deep down, something told me it wasn't. Something told me this was exactly what he didn't want to say. That night, when Daniel returned from work, I didn't even give him a chance to settle in. Who was Anita? He froze at the door. His face went pale, his mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. I asked you a question, Daniel. Who is Anita? His hand dropped his keys onto the floor with a soft clink. Where did you hear that name? My voice cracked. Don't answer a question with a question. Who is she? He ran his hand through his hair, pacing. It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. Because someone messaged me, told me to ask you about her. And your son. His body stiffened. He stood there silently, as if deciding whether to tell the truth or lie. But I could see it in his eyes. There was no lie big enough to cover this. He sank onto the couch like the weight of his secret had finally crushed him. Anita is someone I was involved with. Before you. Before we got married? He nodded slowly. And a little after. We were on a break, remember that 1 month we stopped talking? I remembered it well. It was the lowest point of our courtship. We'd fought, and he disappeared for weeks. When he came back, he said he'd realized he couldn't live without me. I didn't know she was pregnant, he said, eyes to the floor. She didn't tell me until after we were already married. She said she didn't want to ruin things for me, that she'd handle it on her own. I could barely breathe. And you let her? I choked out. You let her raise a child in secret while you married me and planned a future with me? I thought it was for the best, he said. I send money. I visit occasionally. Occasionally? That word sliced deeper than any lie. So, all this while I've been cooking for you, dreaming with you, planning a family with you, you've had a whole other family behind my back. Tears blurred my vision, but I refused to let them fall. I didn't want this to come out like this, he whispered. I just panicked when you said you were pregnant. I didn't want to mess everything up. You already did, Daniel. He reached for me, but I stepped back. No, I said. Don't touch me. I walked into the bedroom, shut the door, and locked it. And for the first time since the test turned positive, I cried. Not because I was pregnant, but because I didn't know the man I married. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, one hand on my belly, the other clutching the duvet like it could hold me together. My body felt heavy, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. He had a son. With another woman. And he hid it from me. I kept hearing his words, I visit occasionally. That was the part that hurt the most. Because now I was questioning everything. All those unexplained weekend trips. The mysterious calls he'd step out to take. The way he sometimes came home distant and distracted. All the signs were there, I just didn't want to see them. The next morning, I didn't speak to him. I didn't even look at him. He knocked gently on the bedroom door and said, "Can we talk?" But I didn't answer. I heard him sigh and walk away. By noon, I got a call from my best friend, Zainab. I hadn't told her anything yet, but the moment I heard her voice, I broke down. "I need to see you," I whispered through tears. An hour later, I was in her living room, curled up in a blanket, spilling everything, every message, every confession, every ache. She was quiet for a while, just listening, holding my hand like she knew words wouldn't be enough. "Babe, I'm so sorry," she finally said. "I know this hurts. But you need to start thinking of yourself. And that baby." Her words hit me hard. Because up until then, I had been thinking about him. About us. Trying to fix what he broke. But now I had someone else to think of. Someone innocent. Someone forming inside me. My child. That evening, I went home ready to talk, not for his sake, but for mine. For closure. For clarity. He was sitting on the couch, eyes red like he hadn't slept either. When he saw me, he stood up quickly. "Faith," he said, "please. Can we talk?" I nodded. But I kept my distance. "I need the truth. All of it. Not half. Not softened. Everything," I said calmly. He nodded, defeated. "She didn't want me to tell you. She said she'd ruin everything if I did. Anita's always had this grip on me. I thought I could manage it, quietly support the boy and still build a life with you. I didn't plan for you to get pregnant so soon." "So soon?" I scoffed. "We've been married 2 years." He said nothing. I felt something shift inside me. A quiet kind of rage. The kind that doesn't explode but simmers. "I'm carrying your child, Daniel. I deserved honesty. I deserved the choice to walk away from this mess." He looked up at me, eyes pleading. "I love you." "No," I said coldly. "You loved the idea of me. The peace I brought. The home I gave you. But love? Real love doesn't hide sons and mistresses." He looked like he wanted to argue, but the words never came. "I'm going to stay with Zainab for a while," I added, grabbing a small overnight bag. He moved toward me, but I took a step back. "Don't. Not now." And as I walked out, I realized something terrifying. This may be the beginning of the end. Zainab's guest room became my escape. It had a soft lilac scent, quiet corners, and none of Daniel's shadows. For the first time in years, I slept alone, yet slept deeply. Maybe it was the absence of lies. Or maybe it was the silence that didn't hurt. But my heart? My heart was still bleeding. Zainab was gentle with me. She never pushed, never pried. She just brought me tea in the mornings and held my hand when I needed to cry. "I keep wondering," I told her one evening as we sat on her balcony, "was I not enough?" She turned sharply. "Don't you dare." I looked at her. "You were enough, Faith. You are enough." He wasn't. "Don't carry his guilt on your shoulders." I nodded slowly, tears rolling down my face. She was right. But it still hurt. The following weekend, Daniel asked to meet. Not at the house. Neutral ground. A quiet cafe we once loved before marriage turned into a battlefield. He looked tired, older, like life had aged him in just a week. I said nothing as he sat down. I wasn't here to comfort him. I was here for truth. "I've been thinking," he began slowly, "about everything I've done. Everything I've hidden. And I realized something." I raised an eyebrow. "I've always run away from responsibility," he said. "Even with Anita. Even with our son. I didn't fully commit to being there. And now, with you. This child. I just panicked. You panicked, I echoed, bitter. So you chose cowardice? He didn't argue. I want to be better, he said softly. For you. For our baby. But I know I may have already lost you. Silence. I stirred my coffee slowly. Then looked at him, steady and calm. I don't trust you anymore, Daniel. And I don't know if I ever will. You didn't just break my heart, you broke us. You built a life with me on half-truths. He looked down. I need space, I continued. Real space. Not for drama. Not for revenge. For healing. He nodded. Will you keep the baby? I stiffened. That's not even a question, I said sharply. I will keep my baby. But don't get it twisted, I'm doing this for me. Not you. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked small. Like a man realizing too late what he had lost. I stood, dropped some cash on the table, and turned to leave. Then paused. You said you always run from responsibility. Maybe it's time you stop. And then I walked away. Tears didn't fall this time. Because heartbreak wasn't new anymore. I was learning to live with it. Weeks passed. The silence between us grew louder with each day. I stayed at Zainab's, going for antenatal appointments alone, clutching my scanned pictures like tiny trophies of strength. The baby was growing. And so was I. Each kick reminded me that something beautiful was still happening despite the pain. One Sunday evening, I stood in front of the mirror after my bath. My baby bump was visible now. Round, firm, undeniable. I placed my hand on it, whispering, I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I promise you love. That much, I can give. Behind that smile was exhaustion. From overthinking. From crying at night when no one could hear. From wondering how everything had changed so fast. That night, Daniel called. I stared at his name blinking on my screen. I hadn't spoken to him since the cafe. Part of me wanted to hang up. But the other part, the one that still remembered the man I married, answered. Hello. His voice was hoarse. Faith. Can we talk? Please. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. But he showed up at Zainab's the next morning. He looked rough, unkempt hair, crumpled shirt, tired eyes. Not the Daniel I knew. I've started therapy, he blurted out. I blinked. What? I signed up for therapy. I'm attending every week. I needed help, and I'm finally admitting it. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. This is a letter. For our child. I know I've messed up. I know I don't deserve forgiveness right away. But I want to show you that I'm trying. I took the paper, hesitantly. And Anita? I asked, my voice calm but firm. I told her I'm done living a double life. I'll take care of my son, but the emotional games end now. I made a vow to you. I just didn't know how to honor it until I nearly lost you. I looked at him. Not with love. But with clarity. You don't get to walk back into my life just because you had an awakening, I said. This isn't a redemption story. This is my life. My baby's life. He nodded. I know. I studied him. For the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt sadness. Because love doesn't always win. Sometimes, healing means walking away. Later that night, I opened the letter he wrote to the baby. It was messy. Raw. He apologized. He begged. He hoped for a chance to one day be the father he never had. I cried reading it. Not for him. But for my child who would grow up with a truth I never expected to tell. And for myself for finally seeing that some goodbyes are sacred. It was a cold Thursday morning when I went back to our house. Not to stay. Not to beg, but to pack the last pieces of me. Daniel was at work. I had told him I'd come by. He said he'd stay out of my way. And I appreciated that for once, he respected my space. Walking through the living room, I paused by the wedding photo on the wall. We looked so happy in it. So hopeful. It almost felt like a scene from someone else's life. I took it down, gently. Not to keep it, but to let it go. Room by room, I folded the remains of our life together into cardboard boxes. My books, my clothes, my art supplies, the throw pillow my mom gave us. I left behind the wine glasses he could toast his memories alone. As I entered the bedroom, I caught sight of the dresser mirror. For a moment, I just stood there, looking at myself. A woman changed. My belly had grown. My eyes were tired, but wiser. There was something in me now that I hadn't had before. Strength. A quiet, unshakable kind. Zainab arrived 2 hours later to help me load the boxes. We worked in silence, the kind only true friends can share. Just as we were locking up, Daniel's car pulled into the driveway. He stepped out, slowly. We hadn't seen each other since he gave me that letter. I half expected another emotional plea. But he didn't move closer. Faith, he called softly. I turned, expression unreadable. He swallowed. You look beautiful. I said nothing. He walked a little closer. I won't stop trying. Not because I want you back. But because our child deserves a better man for a father. I nodded once. I hope you become him. The silence stretched between us like a tightrope. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled, small and sad. Goodbye, Faith. And I whispered, goodbye, Daniel. I got in Zainab's car. As we drove off, I didn't look back. That chapter was closed. And for the first time in months, I felt something unfamiliar but welcome. Peace. 7 months later, I held my daughter in my arms. Yes, a girl. Her name was Eliana, which means God has answered. Because he did. In ways I didn't expect. In moments when I had no words, only tears. In places where all I had was faith. I gave birth in the quiet of the early morning, with Zainab beside me. She cut the cord, cried harder than I did, and kissed my forehead like the sister I never had. And Daniel? He came to the hospital the next day. With flowers and a teddy bear. He didn't beg. He didn't cry. He just stood at the doorway, eyes on Eliana, and whispered, she's perfect. I let him hold her. He looked at her like she was his second chance. Maybe she was. But not for us as a couple, for him as a man. A father. And I wasn't going to rob her of that if he truly stepped up. But my heart? It had healed differently. I had moved into a small apartment near Zainab's. Built a nursery. Started working from home as a freelance writer, telling stories of healing, survival, and strength. Women messaged me, often strangers who saw themselves in my pain. And in all of that, I found purpose. I wasn't the girl who waited for love to return. I was the woman who chose peace when love turned to poison. One evening, while rocking Eliana to sleep, I looked at her and said, your father loved me the best way he knew how. It just wasn't enough. And that's okay. Because sometimes, love doesn't conquer all. But truth does. And healing? Healing walks in when love walks out. I still believe in love. I still believe in family. But most of all, I believe in myself. And Eliana? She will grow up knowing her mother never stayed silent, never settled, and never gave up on happiness. She will know that leaving isn't failure sometimes, it's the only way to survive. The end.